What is up guys, Alex from Lakey Wargames here, and welcome to today's video, episode 3 of the Middle-earth strategy battle game slow grow campaign, Elves of Rivendell 2024. We're going to waste no time and dive straight on into today's video, and we're going to be covering all of the following points. We're going to be going over how we did for hobby goals round 1. That's going to include the bonus hobby objective, how we got on with it, and I'm going to showcase off my paint scheme that I've gone with. We're also going to look at the list that I chose to take for round 1. Slight spoiler alert, I changed my list at the last second. We had 3 different lists from the previous episode that we were talking about taking, and I took a sneaky 4th one by completely changing the entire pot. We're also going to have a look at how my first ever and second ever games of Middle-earth strategy battle game went, including the results obviously for the slow grow league games. We're going to go over some of my thoughts about Middle-earth strategy battle games so far after those games and what I thought about it. We're also going to take a look at the round 2 hobby goals, so that's going to be for the second month, the bonus objectives that we have to complete. And I'm going to go over, just like we did last month, I'm going to go over a couple of different list ideas I'm thinking of taking for that second round, expanding upon the list and ideas of this first round and how we got on with it. So let's waste no time at all and let's see how we did for the hobby goals of round 1. Now, I got really sick with the horrible flu that has been going around, that 100-day cough or so as they call it, and I was really sick for 2 weeks of the first 2, and then the third week I still wasn't feeling great, and I had sort of all the horrible sniffles and cold bits that go with it. So every time I looked down trying to paint something, it was just mayhem and it just didn't happen. So I actually ended up missing the entire first month because I was a little bit late to it, and then I was ill over the 2 weeks prior, and then between catching up on things like work and real life, bits around the house, etc., I actually missed the deadline for round 1, but thankfully the kind guys that are running the slow grow and playing at the club let me play a catch-up game as long as I did that before the start of round 2 and sort of got myself back on track. So I didn't actually get any of the hobby goals. The hobby goal for round 1 was to paint a hero or to paint your entire warband. So say if you had a captain and he was leading 5 guys, you could either paint the 5 guys, so the warband itself, or you could just paint up your hero. Either or would have scored you the bonus point for the hobby round. And as you can see from the picture up here on the screen of the list that I was going to take, I only painted the 2 spearmen, again because I was ill while that took place, so I missed the whole thing completely. I hadn't painted a single thing because I was still assembling, building bases, spraying them, and then to paint them as well. I could have just quickly painted up the captain on foot that I was going to take, which would have probably would have been the better idea of the 2, but I'd already missed it, so I decided to just start cracking on painting out some bodies because I wanted to do a test of the scheme on some sort of normal troops before jumping in something big like a hero. And you can see in the background there that there are also 3 stone looking statues. That's again because I missed round 1, so this is a slight spoiler and sneak peek into the next round 2's hobby goal, so we'll talk about them in the next video because this is just going to be a recap of that first month. But I wanted to get a head start, and that was sort of the bonus hobby goal for that next round. And yeah, I wanted to jump on that as early as possible, so I did my 2 test paints, then I smashed out the hobby goal in advance, and then I was like, I can decide to catch up on painting the rest of my troops after that because I didn't want to miss any more of those bonus points. And I was really happy with how these miniatures came out. I'm going to put some 360 videos up as well for you to be able to see, but I went with the purple and gold, and we went with I changed the grey to a black, mainly because I thought that the black with blue highlights had a bit more nice contrast to it with the purple than sort of a flat grey. And as you can see, we've still got the flowers and the grasses as we planned, along with those purples and those golds, but I decided not to go down the snow road in the end because once I put that grass tufts on, I was kind of thinking that adding, we've got gold, we've got black, we've got blue, we've got purple, we've got brown, we've got silver, and then I thought if we add, and then we've got green and blue pink flowers, and then if I add white on top of it as well, it's just going to all be a bit much. And to be honest, when they were looking like this with the bases already done, I thought that this just looks absolutely superb, and as it is, and all the nice warm colours that are on the actual elves themselves would probably clash with the cold feeling of the bases in a way that I didn't want it to come across. So I kept the snow off the bases in the end, but everything else went to plan. We got the nice blue gems there, and I used a little bit of ard coat, so they're actually really shiny in person. They give that nice glinting sort of reflection to the actual gems, and I'm really happy with how this scheme came out. And yeah, now it's just going to be replicating this scheme across the entire rest of the force there. So next up on the agenda is the list that I chose to take for round 1 for the game. So I failed the hobby goal there, didn't get the bonus point for that. And then in the games, a bit like a football score, you get 3 points if you win your match at the end of the round, and then you get 2 points if you guys draw, so you both could get the 2 points, and then if you lose your game, you still gain a single point on the leaderboard. This is what I decided to take. So I dropped the banner. I had a few discussions with some people on Discord and Facebook, and shout out to BATTLEBOND Miniatures, who's a really cool YouTube tabletop wargaming based channel. I'll link them in the description below for you guys to check them out. If you like my stuff, you're definitely going to like their stuff. But they saw my video and then posted a comment with some sort of hints, tips and tricks for me for my list building, and I really liked some of the avenue of thought that they were going for there, and taking the banner at that many points, which is what I thought it was, but we had that big hiccup with the spearmen and the spray going wrong, so I was just trying to sort of plug the points, less bodies, less to paint. But yeah, I thought that might have been the case with the banner, and in the end I decided to drop the banner and basically turn him into another bowman, and I gave all of my bows spears as well, so we got extra spear support. So it basically means we had the 4 sword and board, 2 spear and shields, and then we have 3 guys with bows that also have spears, so they can join the ranks, help support when the fighting gets tough. Being a good force in Middle-earth, you can't shoot into combat, but evil can, so when the fighting gets thick, you're going to be able to want to get those bodies in, and if you're standing at the back with a bow, it's not much help. But by dropping that banner and turning him into just a normal archer with a spear and a bow, then it allowed me to have some extra points to upgrade my captain. So I gave my captain all of the toys, completely kitted him out. I gave him the horse, I gave him a shield, gave him a bow and a lance, so it was 100 points worth of captain, but he was basically going to be literally, now that he's mounted on a horse, my workhorse of the list. Then we've got a few extra bows to back him up, and then we've also got some nice sort of meat for the front lines within the 6 guys, but kitted out with all their combat weapons. And with that list in the back pocket, that took us into the very first game of the Slowgrow, and it was my Elves of Rivendell up against some Rohirrim. I can't remember the name of the mission, but you can see here in the objective, I'll hopefully edit some photos so I can circle the bits I'm talking about as I'm going. There were 3 objectives, one on the left, one on the right, and one in the very centre of the board, all in a nice line. And the way that it worked was basically whoever had the most models within 3 inches of an objective, come the end of the game, would count as capturing it. The 2 outside objectives were worth 1 point each if you were controlling it, and then they were worth an additional point, so they were worth 2 points each at the end of the game if you were controlling them and there were no enemies within 3 inches. The centre objective was worth 3 points if you controlled it, and then it was worth an additional 2 points if you controlled it and there were no enemies within 3, so that would then become worth 5 points. And the game ended after somebody became broken, so that's when you're below 50% of your starting force. So if you've got 10 models, your breakpoint would be 5, but you wouldn't be classed as broken until you went down to 4 models, because it has to be over 50%, which is the case for me, because that's exactly what I have. I have 10 models, that's why I use that as my example to remind myself. But then you start rolling a dice at the end of each round that one of the forces has become broken, and on a 1 or a 2 the game would end, and at the end of that round then obviously you count up the objectives. The additional points were, there was a point for wounding the enemy leader, you get an additional point for killing the enemy leader, then you'd also score a bonus point if the enemy force was broken as well. And then I think the last point, the 12th point that you could have scored, was if you 25%ed or quartered the enemy army at the same time. Now this was a picture taken just a little bit after deployment, so it started off as you were in sort of opposite corners after picking table sides and rolling off all that good stuff, and we were in opposite table corners. This picture was taken a few movements in. You can see there are also 3 riders of Rohan. I don't know the list, I can't remember the list off the top of my head, but it was like a captain on foot with sword and shield. There's a few members of Royal Guard, a few guys, 2 guys with spears, a few normal warriors. They had throwing weapons in there as well, and then there were 3 riders of Rohan with bows and throwing weapons as well, I believe. You can't quite see them in this photo because this is, like I said, we've done a few turns of movement because we started right in the back corners, but there is a rider behind that building on the left side by the objective, and there's also a rider behind that building on the right side between the building and the tree, going off for those 3 objectives. And mine, I just formed up the old classic shield wall, spears, bows in the back, and my captain, who also had a bow, was hiding behind some infantry, so if I was going to get shot at back, then obviously the first rank counts as the in the way. So I just thought I'd move up slowly, take my time. These kind of missions, again, this is my first ever game of Middle-earth strategy battle game, so the missions were all completely new to me, but I've played enough Age of Sigmar and 40k over the years to know that in a 3 mission objective game you normally only have to capture 2. So straight away from the off, knowing I was in that back right corner, I thought I'm not even going to bother with that left objective unless it really opens up some way to me, and I'm just going to focus on hunkering down to take that right objective and then contest the center objective, and if it goes well I'll have 2 of the 3, and that's all you sort of need to win the game. Obviously if this was a tournament and you're going for your maximum points, then you're going to want to try and annihilate the enemy off of all 3 objectives, but I just thought I'd focus on something nice and simple, not try and make it too overly complicated, because being my first game I already had enough things on my mind to be thinking about. So I thought, put out that shield wall, keep the bows in the back. I spent a couple of turns half moving up and just trying to pepper arrows out. And if we go on into the next photo here, you can see sort of how the movement was going. This was one of the mistakes that I didn't think about until it had already happened, until basically the point of this photo. You can see this from the Rohan's perspective. Because I sat back and was trying to use my bows a little bit more, you can notice that the horse has gone from that center objective in that photo. That's the only thing I killed. It took me 18 shots. Whoever says elf shooting is good is lying. It took me 18 shots across 4 turns. 2 of them I stood still to get the leader bonus, so I was re-rolling hits, so elves are hitting on 3s. And that was the only thing I killed, was that one rider. I was taking pop shots at all the different riders, and across those 4 turns, and I only got the 1, but thankfully I didn't lose anything in return to the enemy bowfire. But that made the Rohan foot wall itself not only walked up to that center objective, because the only thing they had was throwing spears, so they're only in 8-inch range, so they weren't bothered about that. And my bowfire being so ineffective, they didn't have to really rush anywhere, but they took the center objective, and it also allowed their models to move up far enough that they put themselves between me and the objective. So now to try and get that center objective back, I would have to break the Rohan shield wall and fight through them, but not kill them quick enough to end up breaking them and getting that 50% marker, and then losing the game there and then, because there's too many of them between me and the objective, and I wouldn't have the bodies on it to capture it. And it sort of, until this moment happened and they moved up, and I thought, bugger, like I've really shoehorned myself in there by making that mistake. So that's something that I learned right off the bat, and I thought, okay, like, you can take your time in this game in cases like that, but at the same time, that's why it's good to move up, be a bit quicker, and not sit back and shooting, because then you might be winning the shooting war, but you're going to lose out on the objectives, and objectives win games. But we'll go on to the next photo here, and it's quite a jump between the 2. I get a little bit carried away. I didn't take photos at like the end of every move phase and every shoot phase, because one, it was my first time there, meeting the new opponent and all that. I didn't want to be that obnoxious guy stopping every 2 minutes, be like, oh wait, I just got to take a photo. I did ask before the game, obviously, permission to take photos throughout the game, and didn't just start randomly clocking photos. But yeah, and obviously I was really involved in the game and just enjoying it, but obviously I wanted to take some photos so I could keep track for you guys here. But as it worked out, they carried on moving up to get themselves, and as you can see, that central objective is well and truly within Rohan hands, and my shield wall of elves itself is quite far back and away. So now it was that problem of, how do I get through the Rohan bodies without either of us getting 50%ed too quick and not being able to capture the objectives. And it presented to myself. I won the priority roll-off. And as you can see, we quickly flip back to that second picture. The shield wall broke off slightly. I moved 2 guys to one side because, as I said in that initial movement, I wanted to go and threaten that objective on the right hand side. He's only got the 1 rider there and the majority takes it, so I only needed 2 guys on that objective to start claiming it. So I was slowly moving those guys out towards the right, and I kept my captain behind them, just sort of again neutering that oncoming bow fire. So if they wanted to shoot the captain, they'd be shooting through my first rank of guys, which is really nice because then you have to take an in wave for the front rank, and then obviously 50-50 horse or rider. So then when the time came, having that superior movement of the horse versus his foot shield wall, I decided to move those 2 guys up towards the objective, start threatening that. Luckily I had the cavalry advantage because he moved his cavalry out to capture those objectives nice and early, and then I kind of hung back. It meant that all of his riders would either have to abandon the objectives, and there's no one really nearby on foot to then go and take them. It would take a couple of turns to get there. And that left me again with that cavalry advantage in the center. So I moved those 2 guys up towards that right objective, and then I charged my captain, went a bit gung-ho in, and I've read all the rules for cavalry, you know, winning the fight, knockdown, being an elf, superior fight value, all that good stuff, the extra attack on the charge for charging infantry, and I really liked my odds. So I sent my captain flying on in there, and I kept my sort of shield wall back a little bit for I think it was another turn of shooting, and then when I flew the captain in, and the captain did really, really well. We're going to go into the next photo just here, and I can't remember if this was like the exact turn. I think this is the turn after that turn, so there's been another set of movements since then, but my captain flew into those 2 guys, knocked them down, killed them both, and I think one was a normal warrior and one was one of the royal guard, which was really nice. Because after killing those 2, there was only 8 Rohan bodies left, and I had, what would it have been, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, including my captain myself. So we're basically all squared up on that objective, and between this photo and the last, I managed to take a pop shot off with a bow from back there, kill that horse on the right hand side objective. So those 2 guys just moved up, and it allowed me to put 1 guy on the objective and move my 9th guy over because I still hadn't taken a casualty at that point. So he's sort of sneaking around the back by the house. I've now captured the objective on the right, and our numbers are looking amazing in the middle there. My captain got a little bit surrounded, a little bit bogged down, which is what happens when you send 1 guy in versus an entire shield wall. The initial charge was great, but then he got a little bit surrounded. We go on into the next photo here. I was winning most of the fights because thankfully being a sort of 2-on-1, again that elven fight value, just needing to roll the tie or higher dice to win the fights. This is the last photo I think I took of this game here, and this is kind of pretty much how it ended. I think we did 1 more turn of combat after this photo. My captain I think killed that guy on foot, and that was about it. The 2 1-on-1s, the guy with his captain and the 1-on-1 at the bottom there, I elected to shield because I didn't want to risk losing any bodies. I just knew I had to sit on those 2 objectives because I had the one on the right, I had the center because I've got the majority. I wasn't too worried about wiping him out. He was broken by this point, so we were rolling to see if it ended, and this is how it ended. I had 2 guys, like I did on the right hand side, just moving over to threaten that left hand side objective, because in case the game didn't end here, I'm really happy and confident with my numbers there in the middle. So going off to get a few guys to get that left objective, try and score some extra bonus points, was sort of the aim of the game, and that's how it ended at the end of that turn, and it ended with 6-3 to the Elves of Rivendell. I got 3 points for capturing the centre because I was controlling it, but there were still enemies within 3 inches. So it was only 3 points for that. I got 2 points for capturing that right hand side objective, and I got 1 point for breaking my enemy. And then Rohan scored 3 because they still had the left objective. My guys were just 1 turn away from being within contesting range, so he got 2 points for the left, and he got an extra point because he wounded my hero. As I spoke about in the last thing, there is a throughout this campaign for taking an unnamed hero, you can elect to be your champion, and there is a nice level up campaign sort of thing that you can go through. That's something I'll cover in a video completely of its own, and then we can go through the whole booklet, etc, etc. We can spend sort of 10-15 minutes talking about that. But at the end of this game here, my hero managed to gain 3 experience points. I think it was 1 for playing the game, 1 for winning the game, and then I can't remember what the other point was for. but we'll see. We'll cover that in another one. But I gained 3 experience points, and I think you need 4 to reach your first level up, so to speak. So there's a thing when you hit certain amounts of experience points, then you can start gaining things like extra stats. You can gain extra fight value, attacks, might. And there was different classes as well. So if your guy was more someone who's better with shooting, there was a ranger class. There's a commander class. So if you want them to be better at sort of leading your units and just generally buffing sort of like your courage of all your guys, there was one for that. Then there's more of a fighting class, which is what I've gone for on my captain here, because I just want someone who's basically tooled up to go in and deal some damage. I played a second game and I didn't get many photos of that one. It was a really quick, brutal game, and we just basically played out the first game. We had enough time left, so we played a second game, because that being my first ever game of Middle-earth, it went nice and smoothly, but obviously, as we know, repetition and more practice is never a bad thing. The mission for this one was, it's like a battle under moonlight, I think it's called, something like that. You guys that play Middle-earth will be more familiar with that, and eventually I will learn the names of the missions, but it was just the one where you end up trying to kill each other. You're fighting in dark, so any shooting, magic, range, that kind of thing was limited to 12 inches, but those things that are limited, so the shooting attacks, they end up getting +1 to wound. My opponent's list had tons of throwing weapons, which are only an 8-inch range anyway, and this is the one picture that we got from that game, and as you can see how many Rohirrim are left compared to how many Elves are left in that picture. Basically, I tried moving up by the house, being a little bit sneaky and trying to just move up, thinking, well, I can't use my superior bow fire in this game. Not like it did much last game. I killed 2 guys with it, I think, after 20 odd shots. 18 shots to kill the first one. So yeah, so we just moved up, and then it was basically that one turn of trying to weather all the throwing weapons. There was no real way about it. Knowing what I know now, I should have basically just hidden behind that building rather than sort of standing between the building and that tree in the open. I should have just hid behind the building out of line of sight, waited for everybody to move up, and then called a heroic move and just sort of swung around the corner of the building and got a nice charge off that way, ignoring as many throwing weapons on the way in as I could. But I didn't. I just wanted to make a game of it, so I was like, I'll just take a turn of throwing weapons because they weren't that scary last game. But with that +1 to wound and my opponent's rolling being a little bit hotter this game than it was last game, those throwing weapons were devastating, and I think killed like 4 guys in one volley. And then after the lines clashed, and then a second turn of, after fighting and pushing each other an inch away, that second round, I think he won priority, and he went in and he killed another 2-3 guys with throwing weapons alone. So I lost sort of 5-6 elves in total to just throwing weapons in 2 turns, and my list only had 10 models, I think, to begin with. This game just ends when someone gets to 25%, and I think it was whoever's killed more than the enemy was the winner, and I didn't take the tally down for this game, but yeah, I think all I had left was my captain and one of my bow spears, and everybody else was dead within sort of 3-4 turns of fighting. It was absolutely brutal. Thankfully though, my hero didn't go down, because if your hero dies in a game to that campaign rule with the XP and all that good stuff, you have to roll on a injury table, and then you can lose stats through that thing, and then you have to play another game, and then after your game from sustaining an injury you can lose it. But that was not to be the case, and I gained just the 1 experience points for my hero this game for playing a second game in the league. So then he did get his first advancement, and again we'll cover that in another video. So those were my 2 games. We had 1 win and 1 loss, so we scored 4 points for that, and we didn't get any of the hobby points this time around, again for being sick, and this was a catch-up game, so I was just getting ready to basically prepare myself for that wave 2. My thoughts on Middle-earth strategy battle game after these opening games. I was going to say opening turns, but there was 2 games, not just 2 turns. My thoughts on the game in total is I absolutely love this game. I love the flexibility. I love the sort of tactical individuality of every miniature. So obviously coming across from Age of Sigmar being my main game, you take guys in sort of groups of 10, and those 10 guys have to stay in a nice coherent thing because they are a unit. But in this, like, the tactical flexibility of just being like, I've got 20 guys, and if I want to move 1 guy out of my shield wall, I can. Everyone's that kind of independent operator, and it just opens up a whole another level of being able to flank people with certain units, or use your cavalry effectively, or double up to shield walls. Like, it's just really, really cool, and I really love that aspect of it. It's one of the reasons I stopped playing 40k many years ago, is because it stopped feeling like that sort of skirmish game, and I love that level of things. Things like Kill Team and Warcry I haven't really got into, but I should probably try. But Middle-earth seems like that perfect flexibility of, you've got the tactical awareness of something like a Kill Team, but it can be scaled up to something bigger. Not as many models or scale of sort of Age of Sigmar, because sometimes you can push around like 80 to 100 models. In this, it's more like if you've got 30, 40 models, then it seems like a bigger list. Obviously, depending on what sort of points level you're playing, which is relative to any game. But now I'm just rambling about nothing. But yeah, the sort of tactical flexibility and the individual operating way of the way that the game plays, and having all these heroic actions from your heroes, never feels like you've dug yourself into too deep of a hole because of those heroic actions. If you've moved yourself up and then your opponent sort of counter moves you and you think, oh, like crap, that was a good move, I probably shouldn't have gone there, didn't see that coming, then you can all of a sudden you can pop that heroic move, or you can pop that heroic combat, and then sort of try and dig yourself out of that hole, so it never feels like, even when you've made a mistake, you get super punished for it. Because in Sigmar, if you've made that mistake and you've moved out into the wrong point, then your opponent's just going to move up, shoot, charge you, do whatever. There's nothing you can do about it until your next turn, and then when the roll off comes, if you lose the turn sequence, you get double turned in Age of Sigmar. Your guys are still stuck out there in the open, which is kind of your fault in a way, for making that mistake and putting them out there. But obviously, just having that thing in Middle-earth to be able to sort of call the heroic move, then your opponent can then counter call it, so it might not still go your way and you'll still get punished for making that mistake, but there's that chance that you can dig yourself out of the hole. And through resource management, you need might points to be able to call those things, so it's all about just making sure that you've left yourself enough resources, so if things do go belly up, you can really dig yourself out. And I love that about this game, and I can't wait to get more games in and learn more, because there's such a depth to this game, but at the same time it's ever so simple. A lot of the things are, you both roll a dice, whoever rolls highest wins. If you roll a tie, you check your stats, whoever's got the highest stat counts as winning, and if you've got equal stats, then it becomes a roll off to see who's doing that. And the same with the heroic actions. If you want to move out a sequence, your opponent calls one as well, then you just roll a dice, 1, 2, 3 it goes to you, 4, 5, 6 it goes to me, and it's just, so it's got that really tactical flexibility. It's easy to learn, hard to master, but the in-between is going to be, nice and fun journey to learn, and I really like that about this game. So after those games, let's just take a quick look. I'll put the leaderboard up on the screen here. So this is the Slow Grow campaign scoreboard after round 1. There's 16 players playing, and I slotted in at number 12 with my Rivendell. So everybody played 2 games in this sort of opening round. Felix, the gentleman playing Rohan, who's also the guy that's running the Slow Grow, was a great opponent. It was really awesome playing those first games. He was super helpful, answered all my questions, so big thank you to Felix for helping me through those games and talking me through it and helping with tactics, etc., and for running the Slow Grow and also letting me play the catch-up games. So that was really fun, really helpful, and you can see the difference there. So we both got 1 win and 1 loss, so we got the same amount of points from our games, but he's up there in 7th place because he got the bonus hobby point. We saw in those pictures from our game those lovely painted Rohan that he is using, so it just goes to show that these bonus hobby points are really worth the difference, because there's 5 places between us at 7th and 12th, and all I did was miss that 1 point for not getting to paint my warband. So in round 2 onwards, we're going to really shoot for those hobby goals, and that's why you've seen a little sneak peek of what's coming in the next episode of something that I've already done for the next hobby goals, because I really don't want to miss it. So I did that first after my test paints, because then the rest of it I can do afterwards and we can focus on those. And speaking of hobby goals, what are the hobby goals for round 2? What will they be? Well, you've already sort of seen mine there, little sneak peek, but we'll get into depth about them more in that next episode. But it is to make 3 custom objective markers for your army. There's no real limitations to it. You can make anything that you wanted, but it's just 3 objective markers, and they have to fit on 25mm bases, and you get a bonus point for doing that. Then you can also score a second hobby bonus point for catching up on the last one. So that is for painting either a hero or a warband, same thing as last time. So if you've got 1 hero and 5 guys in a warband, if you paint the 5 guys, you get a point, or you can just paint the hero to get a point. and that's the hobby objective. So there's 2 points up for grabs for those, and it's going to be another 2 games at the end of that round, and the points are going up again. So these were 200-point games. Next month is going to be 300-point games for everybody, and we're going to play 2 games at 300 points. So same thing, 6 points up for grabs for winning and your 2 games, and then there's 2 bonus hobby points. So it's going to be 8 points up for grabs at this second stage of the slow grow. And as for my list ideas, I have 2 different ideas that I'm going for. I really like this initial list here. The captain on horse was a great inclusion. One thing I didn't really think about, it's in the rules, and obviously I know it now through playing it, but I gave my captain everything. So he's got horse, shield, bow and lance. He's an expert rider, so he actually benefits from the shield, the +1 defense while he's on the horse, which is awesome, putting him at defense 7. But once that horse went down, obviously I've given him the bow, and you can't have the bow and the shield. He can still use the shielding rule, but he can't benefit from the +1 defense. So he goes down from defense 7 to defense 6, which against things at like strength 4 can be quite a big deal. So that's something I'm contemplating, is dropping the bow from the captain, just so then if he does get dehorsed, I really do like it in that opening turn, having that 4th bow, because in this game you can only have 1 in 3 of your guys can take a bow for your entire list. It stops you spamming all archers, but heroes with bows don't count towards that limit, so having that 4th bow with just 10 models was really nice to have. And what I'm thinking of expanding on is something that will benefit me to having more bows. So at 100 points I'm thinking of taking Círdan. Círdan is another hero, so then I can have 2 different warbands, because my captain can only lead 12. Círdan can lead another 6, because he was nerfed in an FAQ to only be a minor hero. But the nice thing about Círdan is he brings lots of magic support. Most importantly is Blinding Light, which is basically a spell that you can cast, and then when someone tries to shoot you, if you're within your own Blinding Light range, they can only hit you on 6s. So that means with the elf shooting, although it didn't do much in either of these games, you know, is something that hopefully is going to prevail for me if I trust it and rely on it enough. So yeah, we can sit in the Blinding Light and missions that we don't have to move up too fast. For objectives, then we can try and win some shooting wars that way, and then when we get into the fighting, hopefully we haven't lost too many in number. Rivendell is quite an expensive elite army, so losing things to shooting is really going to hurt, but hopefully Círdan will help us stop losing those. He also has the Enchanted Blades, which gives someone +1 to wound, so my captain being on a horse with a lance, if he charges into infantry, not only is he getting that bonus attack and knockdown, he gets +1 to wound with his lance. And in Middle-earth, unlike AOS, you can actually stack stats more than once. So with Enchanted Blades giving him +1 to wound rolls, and a lance on the charge giving him +1 to wound rolls, it's possible for him to get +2 to wound, and then again those extra attacks and knocking down from being on a cavalry was going to make him absolutely awesome at just chomping through infantry. Círdan comes in at 80 points, so that does eat most of my points up, and I can just add another sword and board and another sword and spear guy in, give myself some more infantry options there, because I want to start adding in some Rivendell Knights. Something that I didn't want to do from the start, something I did think about doing, was a Knights Heavy Force. And it is now something I'm putting heavily into contention, because I spoke to a number of guys at the club, and they don't see Rivendell Knights as sort of being that guy, that gamey thing that I was worried about doing. That's why I didn't want to turn up with just a bunch of guys on horse. They are really strong, but at the same time they're really expensive. They lack numbers, so in an objective game you might have 10 guys that are as hard as nails, but when you're trying to chop through sort of 60 odd orcs and fighting over multiple objectives, you can't be everywhere at once. So it's not something that the guys are too worried about. So it is on my radar, because in the bigger picture of things, obviously once the slow grow has ended, the army that I wanted to end up with is Rivendell Knights. They're quite hard to play. We'll get into that another day, because I know this video is getting really long. But basically the other 300 point list I'm thinking of taking is scrap the one that we've just got, and 300 points on the nose is just Elrond, mounted, heavy armor, and 5 Rivendell Knights. And so that could be a really fun list to play. And then when the points go up, I can bring my captain on horse back in, because you don't need to have that champion throughout the slow grow. It's a completely optional thing. As you can see on the list of some of the guys playing, one of them is playing just like White Council, so it's going to be like all heroes. So it's completely optional to whether to bring your unnamed champion thematically or not. So I might bring Elrond because he unlocks Rivendell Knights. They all have bows and lances, basically sort of like how my captain was. But Elrond allows your knights to ignore the bow limit, so that means you can go pure knights, which is basically something that I'm looking at doing. So that's my other 300 point list. So it's either take my 200 point list, add Círdan, add 2 more elf warriors, one with a spear and shield, one with sword and shield, and carry on going down that road, or we turn it into pure Rivendell Knights. So we go Elrond mounted with armor and 5 Rivendell Knights, which probably is no good at this point. 300 points, you know, 6 models is absolutely nothing. In those 2 games we played, a lot of it, one of them was about being 50%, so that would start ticking down after losing 3 models, and a Rivendell Knight is no easier or harder to kill than just a normal guy on foot with sword and shield. They're still defense 6. Obviously there's a chance that the horse might get killed and the rider survives, but that doesn't really make too much of a difference. If they hit the rider, he's still just a defense 6 guy, so yeah, losing 3 models might happen in next to no time. But like I said, the bigger picture is Rivendell Knights, so I might go down that road. And that is going to be it for today's episode. I'm sorry that this was such a long one, and I've probably waffled and babbled on a whole bunch, and you're probably sick of hearing me talking. I'm going to try and condense this down for the next episode, find a more sort of smoother way of presenting this and talking through it a lot faster. But again, that will come with more knowledge to the game, like with Age of Sigmar. I mean, I've been playing Age of Sigmar for nearly 9 years now, since day 1, so that comes to me a lot easier. It's easier for me to explain and go through things. And obviously with a slow growth, there's a lot more to it than just talking about the game, the tactics. We're going through all the hobby goals and things outside of the game that will bring us to that end of round game. So maybe I might break the episodes up a little bit more, so we do a sort of a hobby video and then the game video at the end of the month, and then it would split down into more 2 15-20 minute episodes than one big 40-minute chunk like now that we are running up to. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and thank you so much if you made it this far. I'm having an absolute blast with this game, and I can't wait to learn and do more with it. As always, if you could like the video, comment down below your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out massively for new people finding the channel and just us growing in general, which means there's more people to be talking about the content and all of us learning and experiencing it together. All of my social media links are in the description below if you wish to see more hobby goodness, including my Facebook, Instagram, and there is a Patreon and an eBay store if you wish to support me a little bit further, and they help me get these videos out that little bit quicker. You'll be able to find all that good stuff in the description below. But that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, guys, stay safe. Happy wargaming.